Thank you so much, everyone, for joining from different parts of the world. My name is Data Girolashvili. I'm the curator of Residency Unlimited, and I'm currently here at the RU space in Brooklyn. We're having a virtual public program with one of our residents from the YBAA program, artist Vladimir Novak, who is the recipient of the 2025 Radoslav Putar Award in Croatia. YBAA stands for Young Visual Artists Award, as part of which winners or laureates of art awards from 12 countries in Eastern, Central, and Southern Europe have residencies with Residency Unlimited. The program is supported by the Trust for Mutual Understanding. Thank you very much for your continuous support. A little bit of introduction about today's talk, Between Sculpture and the City. This is the title for today's conversation that will take place between Vladimir Novak and Nick Tobier, artist and professor at STEM School of Art and Design at the University of Michigan. Vladimir, Nick, thank you both very much for being here. They will discuss several of Vladimir's works, particularly in connection to sculptural works and city spaces, rethinking the aspects of, among many others, materials, weight, light, and coincidental audiences. The talk will be recorded and later posted online as well. So if you know someone who really wanted to attend and couldn't make it due to time difference or other commitments, they can watch it online later as well on RU channels. After the discussion, we will have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please send them in the chat section of Zoom here, and I will be voicing them and asking to our speakers after the presentation and discussion. Before we start the conversation between Vladimir and Nick, I would like to briefly introduce them and present their short bios to you. Vladimir Novak, the recipient of the 2025 Radoslav Putar Award, is a Zagreb-based artist whose practice investigates the limits of sculpture as a medium through the use of objects, daylight, and sound installations, with a particular focus on space, media, and affected individuals. Through iterative processes, he seeks to dismantle established media boundaries by exploring the visible and the invisible, engaging with concepts such as body, mass, object installation, stasis, movement, and light shadow. His recent projects, Invisible, Calm, and Day for a Day, employ radically minimalist and subtle interventions that emphasize processuality and the entanglement of artworks with natural and urban rhythms, their transformation across media, and their physical and socio-ecological resonances operating at the threshold of perception within the ambivalence between malfunction and artistic act. His work challenges the perceptions of time and attention, questioning the boundary between aesthetic experience and banal everyday events. And then we have Nick Tobier, who studied history, sculpture, and landscape architecture, and has worked at the Fabric Workshop and Museum in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and Storefront for Art and Architecture in New York City, and as a designer with the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, Bronx Division. Nick's focus as artist, designer, and educator is on the social lives of public places, both in built structures and in events, from bus stops to kitchens and boulevards. His work is part of the 2025 Venice Biennial, the 2024 Split Biennial, and has been seen at the Smithsonian, the Queens Museum, New York, the Mattress Factory, Pittsburgh, the Prague Quadrennial, the London Festival of Games at Somerset House in London, and upcoming projects at Krag Center for Contemporary Art in Bihać, Bosnia. Nick has received support for his work from the NEA, the Graham Foundation for the Advanced Study of Visual Art, and the Harpo Foundation. He writes for the Triste-based magazine Juliet on artists, galleries, and cultural centers in Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia. Vladimir and Nick, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm very much looking forward to the talk, and without further ado, the virtual floor is yours. I will be appearing again for the Q&A session after your talk.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Data. Dobrodošli, dobri ljudi. Nadam se da su svi dobro iz engleskom, but Vladimir, we're going to start with a question that Vladimir and I've had a chance to talk a number of times, which has been a great gift across the distance. But if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself with an image that you have that starts it, and then I'll ask the first question about your work, just to give us a sense of where you're coming from and where you are right now.
Okay. Yes, I will do that in just a second. So, yeah, Nick had this idea for introduction in this manner. So, this is it. I come from Zagreb. This is a picture of me in 1988. I was 2 years old then, back then. So I was born in at the end of former Socialist Republic of Yugoslavia.
That's great. Even then, I noticed the Coca-Cola on the
And,
desk. That was
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I grew up in Zagreb. Most of my life I spent here, and this is me now in my studio, which is a kind of a recent photo with part of my studio seen in the picture, and few of my recent works like Invisible that we will be talking about. That's just behind me, this huge glass frame and the machine that you see.
that's great. I think it's good that you mentioned scale and we see you looking small there because I was hoping that we could start talking today with this project of yours, Day for a Day, or in Croatian, Dan za Dan, a
Yeah.
project that is physically massive, but one that doesn't reveal itself right away as a sculpture. In fact, many of those people looking at it might have no idea that it is something created by an artist. But for those here who aren't from Zagreb, who might not know this building, can you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at through the images?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, maybe just about the concept of the work, which is it's called Day for a Day because the conceptual idea was actually to somehow prolong the daylight part of the day, transform it into a full 24-hour cycle. And what unfolded actually was that the installation happened in on 4 locations in Zagreb. But what we are looking at is actually a building of a former bulb factory in Zagreb. Pretty specific architecture because this bulb factory had this small skyscraper that was built just for testing the light bulbs. So from 50s until I would say maybe early 2000s, something like that. And then the factory just fell apart and due to import from China and no use of these bulbs anymore. So what happened with this work, you see the lights here, but actually the piece was unfolding on the scale of the whole city in a way. So I installed the microphones at 3 locations in Zagreb. And then I was recording the soundscape of the city on 3 different locations, which were Museum of Contemporary Arts in Zagreb, Croatian Artist Association building, and at the balcony of the Association of the Architects in Zagreb, which is on the main square. And what was the point? So to go back to this conceptual idea of 24-hour cycle of the day, but in terms of daylight, these microphones, they were recording the soundscape on these 3 locations from the dawn to sunset. And then in a live stream, it was those data recorded was translated, first uploaded to a server and then translated into light into a light oscillations which were put in this building specifically built for light. So everything that was in the town during the day, all the loud or quiet periods of the day, all these oscillations in sound, they were just translated into light oscillations, which happened actually during the night. So it was pretty hard to grasp the whole project just from one point in space, right?
Can you show the video? Maybe that would give sort of a good
Yeah.
overview of the relationship between the structure and the street and how viewers might experience it.
Yes, definitely. So just to get there, this is the kind of a location of this building in terms of whole city. So the video is like this. I have some video documentation that starts with this location of the. We will see soon the locations in Zagreb, the locations of those microphones.
Mm.
So it took place as a part of Zagreb Visual Art Salon, which was titled Choreography for Finished Light. But this is a location of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Zagreb. So every location was picked because of its position in the city and a lot of traffic, noise, I mean, migrations through the day. This building is Artist Association building, which is also at the moment a construction site because it's being reconstructed after the earthquake that happened already 5 years ago in Zagreb. And this is the main square in Zagreb. So you have trams here, park, many movements during the day. A lot of And then so all this data that was recorded during the day was sent to a computer, which was the basement of this building. And now we will see the moment of the sunset, actually. So there's still some light on the sky, but in the moment of sun going under the horizon, actually the lights were lighted up. And the lights went on, and they would actually replay the day, but not in sound, but in light oscillations. So it's like you could say that the lights were playing the sound of the day during the night, and then it would happen until the next dawn, and it cycled like that for a month.
Wow, how beautiful.
Yeah.
Was it hard to get permission to install microphones all over the city like that, or technically difficult to get them all to
Microphones
be?
were easier than this building
Wow.
because the building there is a lot of like most of the former factories that were abandoned after the fall of socialism or privatized. It fell into different hands, so it was very hard to get actually a permission to get into the building
Yeah. Yeah.
from the owner. But I did a lot of diplomacy around that, so it actually happened. But for the microphones, actually, it was not because I picked some cultural institutions, which were much easier to
I
to
see.
to to get. And with all of them, I have some sort of relation, and they were yeah, completely up for it.
That's
So
so interesting.
this was much more complicated part to get into the building, and Unfortunately, also this building used to have a lot of electricity, of course, because it was built for bulbs and for
Yeah.
light. But unfortunately, during the period of not working, I mean, of its degradation, actually, it was all the installations were actually stolen. So it was also
Yeah.
very um, not complicated, but a lot of work to do in terms of putting that, getting a lot of electricity for this installation into the building itself, right?
Yeah, it's a huge project, and I think when I first heard of your name, I think when you were first a finalist for the Putar Award, I was aware of these structures you made that I would describe as more like traditional 20th century sculptures out of materials like steel and straw that sort of functioned as objects in space. Can you, for the assembled audience, tell us a little bit about that work and how you got from that type of object-based work to something more like this one that you just showed at, in which you're still working with space and perception, but it's less dependent on the sort of sculptural materials that you manipulate by hand and more about the space itself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. In almost, I would almost 10 years ago, I was working in much more traditional sculptural, let's say, expression. And this is just one work, for example, was with metal and reeds. That was a material that I used in many different for many different sculptural installations, which was much more or less on the line of arte povera movement and
Mhm.
maybe land art.
Yeah.
And then something strange happened in my work, but I would have to say that even those pieces, for example, it was all dependent on space and where I exhibit something. So, for example, even this piece was conceived because of in relation to the architecture itself of this also very specific building in Croatia, in Zagreb. It's called French Pavilion in Student Center,
Mm.
which used to be a fair. So that's why it's called French Pavilion, because it was a French pavilion in history. So today it's an exhibition place mostly. But also these three pieces came out from the architecture itself. So what I have to say is that this working with space is fundamental to my practice, even though it was this massive pieces like this, or some different pieces like, for example, 30 steps in balance installation. That's a piece which really changed my flow of work or my practice, because it's maybe a radical change which happened just in a year, but that's what pointed me in this direction where I'm today. This piece was conceived again because of this round building, as you see, but also it was dragged out somehow from the concept of the exhibition, which was put in front of us by the curator, which was the name of the exhibition was Panopticon, like
Mm.
this round circular prison concept, where the artists would be on this group exhibition. Artists are would be put in the position of prisoners, and the guards public would be those guards, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, this piece was conceived by questioning myself, how could I put myself somehow into the center of this building, because also the main question of the exhibition was the position of the artist towards the institutions of power, funding and all that.
Mm.
So I decided Imagine the walking on the line across one side of the balcony to another, which will be maybe we will be talking about it later. But yeah, it ended up me not walking there in the end, but I did this machine which was actually tightening and changing this tension of line in space, but also making these beautiful but very subtle
Yeah.
movements in space, and especially these curves with the curvature of the architecture. It played really well, I would say.
Yeah. Wh- Can I ask? I know we didn't talk about this before, so tell me if you're unprepared for this. What gave you the idea that you could walk across it? Did you have a background in circus or
Yeah.
parkour or something, or you're just a little crazy?
No, no. At the time, I was thinking, I was working with these straws and everything, and then this concept came in, and I was really trying to answer this concept with my work that I was doing at the time, and I realized that's not going to work. So I started working on some other ideas, and at that time, as you mentioned, I was actually walking. I was doing a lot of free climbing, and
I see.
with,
Yeah.
with that often comes slacklining and
Ah, I see.
highlining.
Got it.
So highlining was a thing that I did at the time, and then I realized maybe if I propose a project where I actually that's what I proposed. I proposed one straight line across this balcony, tightened, and of course walking across. But to to stay in line with the concept, I wanted to do it without safety, but and that
Yeah.
that's when the problem started.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah.
organizers and for myself. In first place, I thought, okay, of course, I can walk 10-meter long line on the height of 12 meters, but from the ground. But then came the question, can I do that on the opening when there's a lot of people there?
Yeah.
So, and then there was this organizer moment who said, no, 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 we are not letting you do that. So that's how the thing switched to the machine and
I
computer,
see.
and yeah,
Yeah.
that's
No,
the
I was
first moment when I actually started using programming in my work.
I know
That's
I was very impressed in a lot of ways at the restraint in which you started to, what I think of as you started to remove both physical material and some of the marks of your hand. And the other projects that I think are like this that maybe we could look at are both No Thing and Invisible, if you could to
yeah.
describe those for people.
So Noting was a piece that happened just a month or two after this line in the same place, space, in the same gallery moment, at the same balcony, actually, because the approximately 30 steps in balance, the piece before, it was a part of a group exhibition, and this was a solo exhibition. And yeah, so this piece was also important to mention in this switch of in my practice, uh, because this project was a moment when I was really struggling with the exhibition that was supposed to take place, and I wanted somehow to to step away from the whole thing.
Hmm.
And because when I was applying that for the solo exhibition there, it was I had this project with straws and all that, and then how it was coming closer and closer, I moved away in my head from those kinds of projects. So I wanted to propose something else, or even just to let someone else have the exhibition. and then
Oh, yeah.
uh, and then I realized, okay, that's it cannot happen as well. So I had this kind of idea how to disappear from all of that.
Beautiful.
And that's when I decided to put a huge cloth, stretchable cloth across this balcony there, and from the down part of the gallery you could pull
Mm.
sculpture and make the sculpture yourself in a way. It always takes a form of a cone, but depending
Mm.
on the tension that you make, on the power you use on it, and the position where you are standing in space, it changes its form in a way, right?
So if nobody pulls it, it just looks like a black
It looked like a black cloth, and and that was this line
slime.
of rope just hanging there.
Yeah. And that image that you have that shows what looks like a tiny person pulling it, I think is
Yeah,
beautiful because there's something about, the tiny, the human presence as so minimal, either
yes.
on Earth or in a piece of architecture like this. That's really fantastic.
Yeah. This piece had this idea of directly trying to put a person in the situation where you have to, because that's what I'm trying to achieve with most of my works, to to somehow provoke this awareness of space where something is happening. And then, I mean, this relation of architecture and the works inside of it in terms of gallery space. So this work actually provoked this edge of or tension line between the work itself and the architecture. Of course, they work together in this situation, and that's when the piece actually gets unfolded.
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Uh, and then you mentioned the project called Invisible.
Invisible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another story in a way where I went in much more radical way because in most of the works, which was maybe not so visible from these pictures until this moment, but light became a very important part of the work. Of course, when you work on a sculpture, it's inevitable that you have to work with light. I mean, mostly artificial lighting. And so I started focusing on the light as a material more than just a secondary moment in my work. And where that's when I got to this idea um, how to achieve very subtle intervention in something which happens every day, and that's the moment of sunlight falling into our interior spaces. And what I conceived, I that's when I conceived this idea of making a machine that you see here, but that's just a tool for something that I wanted to achieve, and I wanted to articulate somehow those shadows falling into spaces, which often actually they are there, but we don't really perceive that as something aesthetically qualitative or something. So had this idea how to somehow articulate and make this in actually invisible phenomena that happens every day in our spaces to make it somehow more alive, more visible. And that's when I got this idea of putting a double window in front of the window, actually.
Mm.
And so this machine that you've seen on the picture before actually contains a water tank. It's a water tank, and the machine is pulling and yeah, pushing the water between two glass panels, very thick glass panels. So it actually, when this level of water distorts an image, the natural image that falls into the interior space. Uh, yeah, so it
Mm.
maybe while we talk about it, I can
Wow.
also show one video of that.
Yeah.
I'll remove the sound because it's just a soundtrack, more important for the work. But that's what actually happened. So it's a very subtle piece
Yeah.
um,
Ah.
where actually on the level of the water, there is this diffraction of light. So depending on the angle of the sun at the moment, which is moving all day long, actually,
Yeah.
every day on a different position, it actually breaks the lines. And also from the outside here, you can see uh, higher the water level gets, actually these glass panels, they bend, and
Mm.
they become a lens actually, and then it goes back when the water comes out. And so the water was actually moving up and down in different speeds, different time frames,
Mm.
like something, let's say, randomly chosen time frames and
Wow.
positions. Uh,
Wow.
so the work itself actually is this shadow, not the work. The machine is not the
The
work.
work. Right.
The machine is just a tool for this. So it's actually also an ephemeral work,
That's
because
fascinating.
it completely depends on the sunlight, on the moment when there is sun. Sometimes
Right.
there was no
Right.
sun,
Yeah.
uh, and yeah.
So someone could go to this every day for weeks and have a completely different experience based on what was happening in the sky, which is, and if you live in Southeast Michigan where there is no sun in the winter, it would all be
Yeah,
the same.
that work wouldn't
It-
actually, it wouldn't mean anything there, probably.
And can you just, for everyone watching, can you describe where this was? Was it at was it a museum or is it a
It was a
historic
part
structure?
of Slavonian Biennale, one very important and interesting exhibition that happens in town of Osijek in a region called Slavonia in Croatia. And this place is actually an old rectorate building. Actually, the entry aula of this old Baroque building. So yeah, I was very lucky to find this location because it was oriented well for the piece. I mean, this piece really demands a lot of a lot of circumstances to fall into one moment, and that's also this south orientation of the building.
Yeah,
And it was a winter time, so the sun was very low, and so it was actually getting very deep into the space.
yeah.
And I was lucky to have it there for 2 full months. I think so.
The video is really beautiful and it makes me realize how much both in day for day and this that video is really critical in describing the experience to someone.
Yes, yes, definitely, because this work really demands the focus of a person. Even, I mean, I was, of course, I was there in many different moments, and people would go there, a lot of students coming out and in, and of course, they wouldn't really notice it
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's still there, even though it moves up and down and it articulates these shadows and it bends them, it distorts the real image actually. It still stayed very subtle,
very subtle.
even
Yeah.
invisible for people. That's why I called it invisible, not
Well,
so
I
it
think
is
you
it is there, but it's not in a way, right?
I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier about disappearing a little bit, like your presence, your hand, the material. And so the one of the works that I know of yours that is, I think, very radical and brave, because the work, the process of the Putar Award in Croatia is that you're chosen based on a portfolio for a short list of three or four, and then there's an exhibit, and it's from the exhibit that the finalist is chosen. Whereas in Bosnia, it's like a one round thing. But so you chose to show something, this piece called Calm at Salon Galic in Split, um, that that was nearly invisible. In fact, many people probably walked into that room and saw nothing there and left, whereas people who engaged with it got a completely different experience. So, could you do your best to describe what it took for you to choose this work, to make it, and what viewers experienced?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for this comment of bravery. it was a big part also for me to step out with this piece somehow. First, it was exhibited in one gallery in Zagreb called Gallery of the Student Center, and that was really also pretty radical moment for me because mostly all of my works are kind of present and this was very, yeah, it took a lot of courage for me to even go with it. And then the Radoslav Putar Award came in, and I was supposed to choose. I mean, I decided to put one work at the exhibition, and deciding which of works would be the most radical or more of have a lot of effect was actually this one. And in this case of the exhibition, I actually put two very, very minimal sculptures in space. And they are, so it looks like there's nothing, but there are two very thin inox, it's a steel wire, right? Um, just a half a millimeter thick in different lengths. One is actually here, if you see my pointer, there is one
Mm,
vertical here,
yeah.
and one was on the opposite wall, hanging out from the wall like this. But what happened actually, yeah, as you said, someone would enter the space and see nothing, and that was okay for me, because I decided not to point those sculptures out in a
Love
way.
that. Yeah.
I didn't use any light to like spotlight on them or something because I just wanted to see if people even engage more than 1 minute or a few seconds when you see nothing and there's nothing for you and you go. So, but in case of interaction with these pieces, which I really consider as a sculpture, they have almost all the aspects of sculpture. Maybe something that is lacking for it to be a very good sculpture is volume,
Mm,
but it was actually something that happened in the interaction with these pieces because even a most gentle touch of this wire actually produced a very intense sound in space. So this moment of volume of the piece actually happened in the moment of touching it, and then of this relation of sound with the architecture itself. I mean, the resonance of the space actually took place and gave the volume of the work itself, right? So it was a pretty intense experience, actually. That's why I called it calm to be in this contrast, actually, because people would. This is the first iteration of the work here in these images. Because yeah, there's nothing until you notice it.
The
So
photos are the documents of people interacting with it are also fantastic because they look like they're, in
yeah,
white
they're
space,
dealing
just
with
having a good
nothing.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just it was very funny to actually see people from some bigger distance and touching it, and it looked like they are doing some
Yes,
pantomime.
it does. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like nothing is there, but the sound was telling the different story, actually. Yeah.
Um, Mr. Data, do I have time for one more question, or is this now the time when we open to the audience? One more? Okay. So this is a big sort of arching question as your work, as you've shown us your work and as your concerns have evolved or gotten more complex. I'm curious about the role of performance in your work, that there's some sort of coincidental performances where audiences who might not recognize that they're part of it, say their movements or their sounds are being picked up by microphones somewhere in the city and relayed to a building that lights up elsewhere, to ones that demand activation, like pulling the black membrane in Zagreb or interacting with the wire. How do you think about performance yourself and what the role is for you, the artist, for the audience as a performer versus a spectator.
But do you agree if I stop sharing this
Sure,
screen?
sure. Yeah, put on something so yeah.
Well, I think, yeah, that's a very interesting question because the question of performance in my work was not something I intentionally considered as a part of my practice. But it somehow recently it began to emerge really often, and from some different perspectives that so that makes me somehow to actively think about that in recent time. So that said, there's clearly a performative dimension which is present in some of my works, but it's never a direct or in a conventional sense where I would be there as an artist present with my body and performing something. It's rather a position of putting myself or giving myself a role to construct some conditions,
Yeah,
uh, some framework within which a performance could or can happen potentially depending on the situation, right?
yeah,
Like in these pieces, most of those pieces, like Invisible or Day for a Day with lights and sound, it really depended on some external uh, conditions that happened, which I really had no control of. So these performances are not predetermined, but instead they are activated either by audience or through the presence and interaction, or by the work itself as it happened in the installation Day for a Day, where
yeah,
the city actually played the whole role. I mean, it gave how the city worked during the day. That's how the lights were working, really.
yeah, yeah. That's really neat.
Every day the same, not the same, but different,
Different.
slightly different. It seemed the same, but it's different. Especially for me, it was most interesting to catch the difference between weekend and work days. I mean, that was something very interesting.
That was
Weekends were
perceptual.
actually visually much more attractive because weekends were much more quiet. And
Mm,
then each sound, each difference in space actually had much more, a bigger impact than in the moments of, for example, 8 or 9 in the morning when there's a lot of car traffic and
right.
like so you could sense it more. It was much more sensitive this installation during
That's,
the Sunday, for example. It
yeah,
was an interesting one, which I never thought of in advance.
yeah. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
I have more. I have many more, but I think it's time when we invite others. Thank you so much, Vladimir. That was really
Thank you
fascinating.
for guiding us through all this. Yeah. Data?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I'm back. Yeah. I was like the title of your work, Invisible, during this talk. I was thinking like it was. But thank you both so much. It was very interesting, even though it's not the first or second time I'm hearing about Vladimir's work. Every time I'm learning something new, and there's so many really like subtleties in each piece. And well, I do believe they have to be experienced, in person, but it's very
That,
uh,
that's for sure.
nice to hear about them and, see them and have discussion around a lot of topics that Nick has helped us, bring together and put into this wonderful talk that we just had.